So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to this Centre of Excellence Roundtable. My name is Ian Gotts. I'm the CEO of Elements.Cloud, and this roundtable is being brought to you by Elements.Cloud and Own Backup. A little bit of background on the roundtable. We've been realising that over the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years that Salesforce is becoming more strategic. It's a broader scope and obviously more integrations. And we're seeing customers now with multiple orgs. And therefore, the Centre of Excellence is a term that we're seeing more and more often as we work our way around customers. And clearly, it's a topic that's interesting. We've got over 330 people registered for this event. We've assembled an awesome panel. I was just totting it up. We've got over half a century of Salesforce experience on the panel. So I'm looking forward to a lively debate. But before I introduce the panel, I'd just like to go through and just really level set what we mean by a Centre of Excellence. There are 13 pillars there. And the first and most important point is when you look at that list, you go, well, I haven't got 13 people. How on earth am I going to staff a Centre of Excellence? And the point is it's actually skills, not roles. And people seem to focus on the word centre rather than excellence. So this is all about putting in place some of those pillars, and as it says there, these are phased. And in a moment, I'll talk about how you would phase the introduction of some of these skills. I'll just go through them very quickly. Vision. So, what actually is the vision for Salesforce? Think of it as a product. If you're any product company, you have a vision, you have a roadmap. So, what is your vision for Salesforce? What leadership? Where is the support coming from? Is it from IT? What business level of support? In terms of governance, how are we driving things around a change cycle? Is there a governance board? How are we making sure that we have the right sign-offs, we have the business case, the return on investment nailed? In terms of change control, not just the changes to Salesforce, but everything around it, the training, the change management. The next point there is methodology. Waterfall, is it agile, is it a combination of those? But again, what is that? What is your implementation methodology? Standards is not just technical standards, it's standards around training, it's standards around documentation. Then the big one, metadata management. Salesforce is very powerful, but with power comes a level of responsibility to make sure that we're not building up a level of technical debt. Architecture, and again, a huge issue in terms of upfront design of the systems you're building, not just of Salesforce, but obviously of the integrations. Change management is all about how we're changing the hearts and minds of people, not just about can we change the software, but can we actually get people to adopt it and use it the way it's expected. PMO stands for Program Management Office. That's all about managing the program, managing the projects, the project streams, about driving out that return on investment. Salesforce needs enterprise tooling. That's why companies like Elements, Own Backup, Capado exist to support the implementation. And the last one on there, prototyping. What we're seeing with people with multiple orgs is that the Centre of Excellence ends up being that centre of innovation. Something which works well in one org can be picked up, used and applied in other areas, or even the Centre of Excellence is there driving the innovation and saying to the business, look what's possible. So again, that's where that prototyping comes from. And as I said, these are skills, not roles. They're phased, so you don't have to have all of these from day one, and they're solved problems. We're not having to make this up from first principles. As I said, there's over half a century of experience of Salesforce on the panel, but there's significantly more experience when we think about IT development. So lots of the things we're talking about, we've seen in other ecosystems. And a report that came out from 10K Advisors identified that those with a Salesforce CoE report far better return on investment and a higher and therefore better results. So clearly there is a business case for putting some of these things in place. So the question is, how do I do that? And what I looked at here was small, medium and large. Which things that you need to have in place from day one, which things can be delayed as you get larger. And small, medium and large does not necessarily mean the number of users in your org. This is about the level of complexity. You could be a small wealth advisor with a very complex, highly regulated environment. And therefore, I'd consider that large because of the size of the impact or the size of the risk. And as you can see there, if it's a white dot, probably not required. Yellow means yes, you should be thinking about it. Red says obviously you need it in place. So as you can see, by the time you get to large, I'm expecting there's a red dot in every single box. But some of the things, when you're small, you probably don't need. Ideally, you should have them in place, but you can get away with not having them. So that just gives you some principles around the Centre of Excellence. You've heard enough of me. Really what we want to do is hear from the panel. So an amazing panel. I'll go from right to left. Obviously, you've heard from me. Sharon Bates has joined us. She's had 10 plus years in Salesforce, had a short foray out into Oracle, and then decided that Salesforce was the best place to be and came back. But she's been looking after the strategic accounts for Salesforce, so has a perspective of what those companies out there who are the most complex, and where Salesforce is the most strategic. So again, she brings a unique experience from the inside. In the middle there, Leo Minerverni, just joined Own Backup, had a number of years in the technology industry in terms of Oracle and BEA, but has joined Own Backup at a very exciting time. They've just been voted the fastest growing company in their sector in the US, and obviously with investment from Salesforce Ventures and Insight. I think they something like 167 million plus change. So it's an exciting time to be out there growing a business. Next we have Mark Hill. Mark, a fellow Brit, Group CIO for 10th Revolution Group. You may not have heard of the name, but you've certainly heard of some of their subsidiaries if you're in the Salesforce world. So Mason Frank, the recruiters, and also Revelant. But before that, he spent a number of years in the UK insurance market, again, highly regulated, so he understands the challenge of being a CIO in that world. And last but certainly not least is Matt Francis, Global CTO for Salesforce. He's at IBM now, but has spent time around the Salesforce ecosystem in a number of consulting firms, Capgemini, Accenture, I'm not sure we crossed paths there, and also PwC. So amazing panel, a great level of experience in terms of not just Salesforce, but also just implementation of business change, business transformation out in the wider world. So let's start off, Matt. We'll start with you. As I said at the beginning, Salesforce used to be a tactical purchase by the business, but now it seems to be strategic. And again, we've got a panel of CIOs here. It seems to be strategic and now owned by the IT. So if you think about IBM's customer base, maybe some experience from previous companies you worked with, is that true? Is that a trend we're now seeing?
Yeah, I think the enterprise size of the initiative and the transformation definitely includes IT. And a lot of times they own bringing in the data, the integration, SSO, all the different infrastructure needed to bring Salesforce into the enterprise level. But it's still really important to have the side of the business and IT working together. So we really want to go in together, regardless of who owns it. Sometimes we think the IT owns it, or we think the business owns it. It's really, to your point, around delivering value for the business and going back to that ROI story. But we need IT at the table for sure, and we need to bring in the right data, the right integrations, and set it up for success.
Absolutely, I'm seeing a trend where it's both IT and the business working together collectively to not only define the roadmap for from a technical perspective, but also to evaluate scenarios that they should be considering for the future and how they're measuring the probability of those scenarios and how they prepare for the inevitable scenario they had not thought of in advance and being able to pivot to that. And if we've learned anything in the past 2 years or so, is that we need to prepare for through many of the scenarios that we had not foreseen, both from a business perspective, geopolitical perspective, as well as technology perspective.
Yeah, I mean, digital transformation has accelerated everybody's view about how much can be done and how quickly. So Mark, again, let's have a CIO's view. I said people are probably familiar with Mason Frank and Revelant, so clearly you're all in and committed to Salesforce, both from a business perspective, but also from an IT perspective. But Salesforce isn't the only product. Where does Salesforce fit in your IT landscape, your IT roadmap, and its relative importance?
Yeah, I mean, look, from a business perspective, Salesforce, as you said, is clearly central to everything we do, Ian. And I think, and I think the talent, with what we do, because I really introduced myself as a talent organization now. The talent around Salesforce is obviously key, and the demand gap there's absolutely huge. Look, I think when you buy Salesforce as a CIO, or as an IT leader now, you're really buying into an ecosystem, and you're buying into a platform. It's not really a single cloud conversation. You look at the App Exchange, all the innovation that's going on there. I think Mark did a brilliant job with sort of, pioneering in that space. Get your vendors to get your partners to innovate for you. It's just genius. So I think it's not the cheapest platform out there. So when you do make an investment, you absolutely want to leverage that investment. You want to look at the other clouds. You want to look at the other things on the App Exchange, etc. And you want to innovate, and you want to solve business problems. So if you are just putting Salesforce in single cloud with a sort of tactical view in mind, it's probably not the platform. It can become a very expensive spreadsheet very quickly, and that's not what you want it to be. So certainly whilst when we put our first cloud in, we evaluate, and I've got a reasonable implementation. We did the biggest platform deal for Salesforce in Europe in 2017. You're really making a decision wider than just that cloud. You're making a decision about investing in a company that's innovating in multiple areas, and therefore you are looking to, as you go through, innovate first if you can on platform. You still have to take all of the commercials and other considerations, into that mix. But yeah, if you're Salesforce and you're not making the wider conversation about everything else they do part of future strategic decisions, you kind of got something wrong.
Well, that leads nicely, I think, into that return on investment story. So you've grown up with Salesforce. Leo, you inherited Salesforce, I guess. So you've been in Own Backup a little less than a year. So did you inherit a center of excellence, or do you have to build one? What did you walk into, and what's your thinking as Own Backup grows to be a more and more significant company?
Yeah, good question, Ian. So I've been with Own Backup a little over 8 months. Prior to my arrival, there was no center of excellence. And a couple of the things that I thought through, right? I entered into an environment that is extremely fast-paced. I mean, our growth has just been remarkable. And the speed at which we operate, again, is just remarkable. And the level of investments that we need to make in order to sustain the growth and scale globally. The goal and the mission in and around CoE is really to create a moment. And I'll preface this by saying, there's no silver bullet. There's no one size fits all, right? It's, every organization, every business unit has its unique structure, its unique format, its unique characteristics. And you really, as a leader, you really need to look from the outside in and have an eye on the business, right? Because it's less about technology, in my opinion, than it is about the business, and truly understanding what are the levers that we're trying to pull, what are the strategies that we're executing against to deliver the value to the organization, right? And you model it around that, and thinking through the components of PMO, right? So coming into this environment, I knew that we were making significant investments even above and beyond just Salesforce, right? And Salesforce is at the core of everything we do. But there's an incredible digital transformation strategy that we're executing against. Having the mechanism to manage and control cross-functionally, right? The activities that go into some of these major initiatives and be able to report on that and have a level of transparency, autonomy, and accountability is extremely imperative. And really, at the end of the day, building the KPIs to understand what is our return on investment. Because if we can't answer those questions and answer the question, why are we doing it, then it's probably not worth doing it, right? But at the same time, having the governance around it so that we're reducing the level of risk. Because at the end of the day, even more so today as we're in this digital economy, right? The speed at which we operate is just, incredible. And we've got to pay close attention to the investments we're making in these major initiatives to ensure that we're delivering the value and we're delivering the tool set for the organization and our users to continue to operate.
I've asked the question and one of you answered, but I'm sure you're all dying to jump in and you've got a different perspective on this. I mean, Mark, I'm not sure where you were in terms of when you first joined 10th Revolution Group, whether you had a CoE. Did you have to put it in place, or are you expecting the consultants? So someone like you turn around and look at Matt and go, Matt, hang on, guys, you must have one in the box. Get it out. Let's get going. How does this work?
I mean, I think Leo touched on some of these points, and I agree. There's no one size fits all, and there's no silver bullet. Look, I mean, I remain a little bit old-fashioned, perhaps bemused about the word CoE, and we build them for people, right? So I'm just laying it out there. What is it? In truth, if you break it down, it's just a simple way of delivering, incremental, regular change to the business and adding ongoing business value quickly, right, in the fastest time possible. It's a way of ensuring that business and IT become one in kind of steering and governance, and they kind of get rid of those historic silos, Ian. That's what that, when you've been in business, I've been in IT 25 years, right? I grew up in all capital markets, actually done a little bit of insurance, but mostly in the capital markets. And, the days of IT in their dark basements and the business in their shiny sales floors, that has gone. And I think the gaps, I think if it's anything, right, it's just to get rid of the silos, right? It's about incremental change fast. It's about bringing people together, to work together on a problem or an opportunity or innovation, and to deliver in this, as people are saying, this rapidly evolving digital world, that we're coming out of COVID as well. No, we're not out of COVID, but trust me, the pent-up demand for cloud technology, including Salesforce, is crazy. And it's a way of delivering business transformation, in a sort of joined up world, joined up way. And I think that's, that's really what it does. So look, CoE, for anyone that's been in IT for a while, you'll look at some of the building blocks, the ingredient, and they'll look familiar, right? They'll look familiar. But the difference is, the difference probably is the lack of silos between IT and the business. You get those people together, they start working together on common opportunities, common challenges, and you do get a slightly different outcome from the more traditional historic approaches that perhaps I grew up with. But it's not unique, right? I've worked on trade floors, I've built trading platforms, I've seen it go from second to millisecond to microsecond. The quants and the IT folks used to live on the trade floor. So it's not a totally unique concept here. It's perhaps been building for some time. It is a more modern name, in the last 5 or so years, I would say. So that's kind of my view of it.
I know we're talking about business and IT, but what I've seen the most challenge is actually between different business units. Look at our organizations that have all these different business units, and they all have Salesforce, they all have autonomy, they make their changes, and they live in their little silo. Bringing them together is the biggest challenge. How do we bring these business units together, cross-sell, upsell, have analytics and reporting, and then AI that we can bring in to make everything better? You can't do that with all these silos. We have organizations that have 70 plus orgs, Salesforce orgs. So the challenge is not only, but I think the IT business challenge has gotten better. I think now it's business silo challenges, and how do you work together? How do you, focus your development, your limited development and configuration resources to help the business units together, right? And the other piece I'll add to it is really the focus. I was helping a COE not too long ago, and they said, this business unit 60% of the revenue, this one's 20, et cetera, et cetera. And it was all about that. And I said, is that really your focus, or your focus on your customer, right? Is your focus on your employee, right? Where's the focus? The COE has to be strategically focused on the overall objective of the entire business, right? And they can't be myopic and just think about one business unit and look at revenue only and look at this and this. They really have to come together and think about what are we delivering together, and then how does Salesforce and other technologies fit into that vision.
So Shannon, how does Salesforce enable that? How do you sell into an organization rather than picking off all the different business units and then discovering that it all ends up at the CIO's lap and going, why have I got 70 of these?
Well, in some cases, Ian, we really are the ones that are bringing together both the business units as well as the corporate vision, the cadence that the organization is trying to deploy. And we've spoken a bit about silos, but the silo is in many cases are constructs of communication styles. In some cases, they're developed because of there's some conflicting agendas, and so through the Salesforce envisioning tools that we use to help customers to ideate and to be able to spark some creativity, we try to overcome barriers either through common language, common initiatives, and look through all these cross processes so there's benefit to each business unit, while there's also a standardization that allows for data to then be able to disseminate to be of value across an organization, which is much easier to say than do, because as human beings, we all go into these types of sessions with some restrictive thoughts about what is possible, and also some things that we believe can't be overcome. And so individual business units have favored approaches individually. And so first to remove that barrier, that bias, and then begin to work together, I think is a communication style that we try to facilitate. We try to spark a level of encouragement by the way that Salesforce ideates internally, but then also to lean onto leaders and to peers that have that beginner's mind. So some, I would say, Ian, is through example. Some of it is through facilitation, and some of it really, I didn't bring this up, but is through showcasing customers that were able to get past some of these barriers and to see what they were able to accomplish, and then bring them in the forefront of some other organizations to do some peer-to-peer exchange.
I think some of this is also bringing new blood in, isn't it? I mean, either Salesforce comes in and is the catalyst, or it's the consultant going in. I always remember my life in Accenture. I didn't necessarily have any better ideas than anybody, but I was a stranger with a briefcase. I mean, whether it's Matt going in or Leo, you've come in new to an organization. There's no preconceived ideas. So again, I think there's different ways of starting to spark that change. So how much do you think external factors like COVID, the acceleration of business transformation, is that making stuff harder or easier to get people to be more aligned?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that. I mean, that's actually a really good question, Ian. And I'll tell you from my point of view, no surprise, I think every organization or majority organizations are faced with this. The level of digital adoption, right, and the speed has just accelerated, bar none, right? I think some of the challenges, and maybe this is just management style, we are a global company, right? But at the end of the day, it's the moment of collaboration, human to human collaboration, that at times we feel may slow certain decision-making processes down, right? Yeah, Zoom is great and we can instantly connect, but there's a level of, just that interaction and that collaboration and that brainstorming on a whiteboard moment, right? That is kind of removed from the equation. And at the same time, if you look at traditional corporate IT, we're accelerating the way to ensure that our employees that are all remote or majority being remote have connectivity and are enabled to perform their duties given the format of how they're working today. So it's absolutely a very interesting equation, and bar none, an interesting moment in time with sets of challenges.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing with Leo. It's very hard from a consulting organization. We like to see people, we like to see clients, we like to be in the same room. So it's very different, being on WebExes and Zoom calls and doing that. I think it does slow down, the partnering part of it a little bit, because if you can get into the room and figure out how you're partnering together, how you're delivering together, and that for CoE as well, coming together as a leadership team to figure out how do we work through this stuff. And body language is a huge amount of communication. I think it's like 80%, right? I can't remember the exact number, but how we communicate with our hands and our body language is missed a lot of times. What we encourage our teams to do is make sure we go on camera as much as we can. We see a lot of people joining WebExes or calls and they're off camera and all you hear is audio. We miss so much in communication and emotion when we do that. So we try to encourage that to bring people together and do fun things that are not on WebEx. We use Slack, for example, and we do Ask Me Anything Slacks across the company, which are really exciting. And people Slack back and forth and ask any kind of questions. So try to mix it up. There's a lot of great tools, but mix it up. Don't always do video. Don't always do Slack. Mix it up. Try to stay away from email.
I think the acceleration of what's going on in the world now, digitally, globally, COEs are going to become much more prevalent, much faster than we ever thought. People are all, if you haven't got one and you want to innovate, people are going to, so everyone's scrambling. It's a bit like DevOps when it first arrived. Everyone's now, will start on this journey if they're not on it, or mature what they're doing, because if you can work together on common problems with the business, within a department, across departments, whatever, you're going to get better outcomes, right? And that's what everyone needs to do quickly.
But that suggests you have to be a big multinational with multiple divisions to need a CoE. Is that true?
No, I don't think so.
Oh.
It's about getting consistency, getting standards. So that phased idea of the slide I put up there, and am I 100% right, 90%? What would you disagree in terms of that phasing? Let's make it easier. What do you think the priorities are? If you had nothing, what are the first things that you're thinking?
Again, it's all predicated on, from organization to organization, right? I think from my point of view, if I had one or two choices in the environment I'm in now, given the scale and the growth, starting with a program management office in essentially driving a framework around how we're executing against digital transformation cross-functional initiatives is bar none extremely urgent. It's critical to our business. We want to make sure that we're making the right investments and we're getting the ROI. Second to that is change management. And I put change management and governance kind of in the same bucket, if you will, right? We need to understand what the impact to not only the organization, but to the process, right? And to the people, and ensure that we are educating even more so today, right? Because we are in this highly, disparate working environment, right? You don't have the user doesn't have has less of a flexibility to go over to a colleague and say, hey, can you help me out with this? They just rolled out this new workflow. I can't figure it out, right? We're removing that. So we've got to pay special attention to ensuring that we're educating, training, and enabling our employees against change management.
The one thing I would add to that would be the executive support, the executive alignment at the top. right? So getting organizations and different business units to agree is very difficult. There has to be a guiding mission. There's got to be a strong executive voice in the room saying, we will do this. If you guys don't agree, bring it to me, I'll help make the decision. So I think the executive alignment, and then of course, exactly to your point, the change management and everything underneath, advocates that use the system that are involved throughout the program to evangelize Salesforce. We find a lot of organizations, especially sales organizations, they think of it as big brother. I don't want to record what I'm doing because, I'm a good salesperson. I don't need to do it. But it's more about how does it help you sell more and keep organized and grow the business. So there's all that kind of communication that's really important. So ground up and then bottom down, top down.
I think unless you think strategically and you're going to be strategic about what you're going to be tactical. So I kind of, if I had to pick one, I kind of agree, Matt, that the sponsor is key, right? In truth, the answer to where do you start or anything like that, it depends. Every company will have some of the ingredients, some of the roles, and some of the functions already there. I mean, the technology's there, it's being delivered, change is delivered, it might be bad, etc. But I mean, if you're on fire because you've got outages all the time and other things because of change that are being caused, well, you've got to put the fires out before you start innovating, right? So it will depend. But I tell you, outside of the things that are, notwithstanding all the things that are being said, in my experience, the product owner is also a very, very, very key individual to get into your CoE, your CRM CoE, because they should be that sort of linchpin translator, to really, really drive. Because ultimately, even if you start very small, the idea when you innovate is it grows over time and gets investment. Okay, so that product owner should influence the execs. They should educate up, down, and across, and they're a very, very key role. But it's very, very hard saying where specifically you need to start on this journey. But I would say you can start small. This is not a mutually exclusive. This is not big company mutually exclusive. It's not. You can start small with this, and you will have, even if you bring people together virtually or on a, I want to say part-time, but there's some sort of dotted line agreement that happens, because the user groups are important. They're all important. That can start in a less thick line dotted way to just get going and then grow from there.
Interesting point. You picked up the point about a product owner, and again, probably not relevant for this call, but one of my sort of hobby horses is I think Salesforce admin actually is a very demeaning term. When 20 years ago, when we first started using Salesforce, it wasn't admin, wasn't it? They were adding users and doing admin tasks. We actually need to elevate that to be a product owner. And we're developing some training material and some thought leadership around what it takes to be a product owner rather than being an admin. Because actually that role has grown massively. And maybe somewhere in that CoE stack, I need to think about where product ownership lives. So I'll take that as a chance to work out where we put that.
Or it's not even a technical role. I mean, in my head, product owners shouldn't ever live in technology. And I know that people disagree with that, but it's quite a business-driven role now in terms of, decoding that innovation requirement, etc. But, there's right or wrong with this.
So the product or the product owner or the platform owner, does that live in the center of excellence, or is that part of an IT function somewhere? I
think the center of excellence at some point stops being an IT or a business function. It's a function that sits somewhere into whoever the right sponsors are to innovate in the business. I mean, the fact that you have, unfortunately, we've all been brought up in a hierarchical, departmental, functional world, but that isn't the way, that isn't the way a lot of companies, a lot of modern thinking companies work when they come together to solve problems, right? So I just think it's a bit of legacy mindset there in terms of where potentially, and it's more, it'll evolve. I mean, look, don't get me wrong, that's where I am now. It's in IT, right? So I'm being a hypocrite here, but I think it evolves more over time to just being an innovation function that exists in the firm, perhaps.
So I will tell you this, I'd argue that point to a certain extent in the sense that and I've had multiple internal conversations around this, like the IT business function, or the IT unit is so uniquely positioned inside of an organization in the sense that it touches, right? IT touches almost every part of the organization, right? All the way down to physical construction of building out another office, right? And the support that's needed there. But the point being that because it's so uniquely situated inside of an organization and has, all these touch points cross-functionally across all business units and inner organizations, that it seems to be a natural fit for the CoE to kind of live, quote unquote, within the IT umbrella, right? Specifically if that organization is driving, strategic digital transformation initiatives, supporting the core systems that, to your point, Mark, they just grow over time, all right? It's like an octopus with tentacles. It just grows over time, and before you know it, you're touching multiple segments of the business. But to me, I'd argue it seems to be a natural fit. However, I think the key there is the term innovation, right? At what point, as an IT function, there's always this balance, right? How much are we working cases and firefighting, being reactive versus being proactive, and start to think in a very, innovative, how can we add value? How can we make things more automated, right? Frame of mind. It takes a certain skill set, it takes a certain environment, but as long as the innovation strategy and support is there from the top down and the momentum is there, to me, it seems to be a natural fit.
Well, I think we're all in agreement. I think that the terminology that we had used in most recent times is a business analyst. Business analyst, was brought in to become almost a liaison of connecting these two languages, the business language, IT language, and then documenting processes so that they could be, specified for a digitization effort, right? And I think now, because we are in this virtual world, our ability to bring in a business analyst to become the expert of business processes is limited. And so I think that conducting a CoE in standards that are in lean concepts, lean initiatives, Six Sigma, that can look cross organizationally to support the sophistication of a process, and then allow for some nimble, agile model to redefine and refine these processes, I think is critical. So I think both I agree with everyone on the panel. I think that the role, though, of a business analyst is going to shift a bit, and also has great importance in the CoE. Because really, to the point, I'm not sure it's an admin is more as really the conductor of the processes that are built into Salesforce.
And again, I've been campaigning for more business analysis, do more upfront. There's a concept called shift left, which is let's get more analysis done upfront before we start building. Let's get the bad news early, which is let's not discover how to break stuff by building it and breaking it. Let's do the analysis up front.
I'd say, Ian, a couple characteristics to look out for. If you step into an organization and there seems to be, a number of initiatives, whether they're strategic or tactical, that have a lack of clarity on deliverables, value, right, deadlines. The org seems to be a bit confused as to why we're doing certain things. I think that's one element. The second is, if you're adopting a technology or an instance, a Salesforce instance or what have you, that seems to be problematic, right? Changes are being released. Users just are uncertain as to what the changes are. Routine outages, right? Things of that nature. I think those are two characteristics that should be high on the list to say, okay, look, we should probably, sit down and identify, 3-4 characteristics from a CoE perspective and determine how best to adopt those methodologies to ensure that we can collectively reach a level of success.
Yeah, I just add to Leo's comments. I think the lack of measuring, you can only change what you measure. You can only change direction if you got KPIs around sales and service and marketing, and you're leveraging the investment to understand how to improve those KPIs. At the end of the day, we want to sell more, we want to support better, we want to have customer 360, and we want to understand what that value brings to the business. If you look at it and nobody can give you KPIs and measures and how this stuff is improving and making things better for the customer, for the employee, or for the organization, that's a red flag to me. A lot of times we have customers that are like, we decided Salesforce, go design and build it. And it's like, let's take a step back. Let's do some ride-alongs. Let's look at how your users are doing things today. Let's baseline some KPIs. Then let's implement it. And then let's see if those KPIs change, right? Have that conversation. Everybody seems to be scared about measuring. We need to measure. We can't know if we're doing it right if we're not measuring. So a lot of times we go in and we don't see measures and we don't see direction changing because of the measures, right? And the data side of it is so important. The analytics is so important to influence our decisions on where we need to go next. And so many people don't measure. I was just told to put in Salesforce, I put in Salesforce. That's really not the point of it. The point of it is it driving success, sales, service, marketing, commerce, CPQ, whatever part of the business. So CoE has to be focused on what are the KPIs, let's look at them, let's use them to guide direction, not making it, emotional.
But I think about what Mark's comment though, which is, this is great. We're sitting on this panel chatting on that, but I've got outages, my hair's on fire. I spent every day I walk in, it's another disaster. How do I buy some time? Do I have to let stuff get worse so I can actually buy some time? What are some strategies there? Because I know a lot of people feel the pace of change is just making life impossible to even plan and get ahead.
Ian, I'll be quick to say it's okay to stop, right? If everything's on fire and everything's a disaster, it's okay to stop for a second and get everybody together, build your CoE, build your plan, talk about your strategy, what's working, what's not working. DevOps is a great example of that, where we see DevOps off the rails. One of our clients is very big in custom software development and takes the same DevOps methodology, applies it to Salesforce, and it blows up. And releases take weeks to prepare, and they have tons of bugs and defects and all this other stuff. It's okay to stop. Like, raise your hand and say, we need to pause for a second, collect, what's working, what's not working, and let's redo this. Let's rethink this and get it straight. Because if you're putting out fires all the time, you're not bringing the value. You're not bringing, what you really need to bring to the business. It's so important to sometimes pause and think about it.
The military, things like that, right? They teach you to pause under fire, right? If you need to, right? It's absolutely fine to do that. I agree. I think another little tactic there. I mean, I agree with everything that's been said, Ian. I think another little tactic there, though, is not only pausing, but you've got to get some governance in place if that's happening, right? You've got to start getting perhaps some kind of user group, some kind of interaction with the business to understand, to educate them to a degree. It doesn't mean you're sitting there saying, what are all the other things you want me to do next week when you're on fire, right? You've got to put the fires out, that's fact. But I think some level of governance straight away can help you. And then you've got, and in parallel to that, you've got to put the fires out, right? Once that's done, you buy yourself some time, and then it's about prioritization, what you do next. And it may well be going and fixing some of the things you've done or improving them, maybe the next thing, before you just keep trudging on trying to poorly add new functionality in. So again, every scenario will be different. Just back a little bit earlier though, you were asking about assessing. I mean, I was jokingly going to say look for the signs of smoke and dead bodies, but I think the other thing, Salesforce have a business value assessment they do. And I'm sure that's on Trailhead in terms of following that. And that's, to everyone's point here, Matt, your point, that gives you some real tangible measure. You put Salesforce in to transform the business. So are the measures you have in place telling you are transforming the business or not? And are you getting that those business outcomes you wanted? Because if you're not, you're going to be unhappy. So you do need to pause, you do need to assess, you perhaps need to do some kind of health check, call me. But in terms of understanding where you are and then putting a plan together jointly with the business, that's the critical thing. We talked about here, together with the business, come up with a plan and then prioritize. Otherwise, you're just going to be unhappy because the business isn't happy, the users aren't happy, IT's not happy. That's nowhere to go.
We've spent very little time talking about technology. It's all about people. It's been all about some of the politics. It's about getting alignment, making understanding where that value comes from. I think it's very easy for us to be in the technology world, rushing to go, I know how to build that. The answer is no. Actually, I think the other thing we heard a lot was pause, step back, let's build a plan, let's work out what's important, what those priorities are. And as I said, even if everything's on fire, I mean, Matt, your comment about it's okay to step back and say, sorry, I'm not going to put any more changes in because actually we're just building on top of something which isn't robust. We can't move forward. And I see the level of technical debt in organizations growing. I think I'm presenting something in a few weeks' time called What We've Learned from Analyzing 1 Billion Metadata Items, in terms of the level of technical debt that's out there. So again, some of that again is how do we step back and start to unpick some of that. There were some questions coming in about what are those metrics that the CoE should be looking at. I'd like to pause that. I think that would be a great topic for the next Centre of Excellence roundtable and start to dig into some of those metrics. The audience is out there going, I'd like a Centre of Excellence. Like, tell me in a couple of sentences why you think it's important. If we could just leave with that, a sentence or two each from you about the value of a Centre of Excellence.
I'll just go real quick. I think it's critical to bring all these, especially at an enterprise level, all these different groups together. And how are we going to transform the customer's journey, with our organization, or the employee's journey, supporting the customer's journey? We all know, happy employees mean happy customers. So that relationship there and what we're delivering with technology is really, really key. The technology is important, but understanding why we're investing in it, why we're implementing it, and how we're going to maintain it. There was a bunch of technical debt questions. I answered some of those. But as we got to keep cleaning it up. It's got to keep getting cleaned up. We got to have a vision. We got to have an architecture, an enterprise standard, for example. How are we building this house? Is the foundation solid, right? So in order to, do that, you need a lot of different people from IT, from the business, from the executive support. All those people need to realize it's important to keep our house in order. The CoE is meant to do that, right? So we got metrics, we got foundation, we got the right skill sets, we got the right vision. So all that comes together through, CoE, steering committee, whatever you want to call it. It's got to be acknowledged, and your roadblocks have to come out. If you've got you're going to have roadblocks. You have to be able to voice them somewhere and get the support you need to go over the roadblock.
It's really enforcing the cross-functional collaboration. You've heard me mention cross-functional a number of times. Cannot be more important to really identify the level of commitment that's required across the entire organization, and really, the accountability, right? It's who's accountable for what, how are we measuring those successes, the value, and at the end of the day, even the deliverables, right? Are we on mark, on target, so that we're communicating, we're setting the proper internal organizational expectations based on the tools and the technology that's being delivered. I think the last comment I like to share, and I'll echo this, it's less about the technology, but more about the business process, and the people.
Mark Benioff's constant reminder that if everything is important, nothing is important. And so defining what is important, and then building, as everyone else on the panel has said, the right framework to define how you're measuring the level of priority and how you're getting to your vision.
Salesforce sells customer success. That's why we buy it. Doing this in a joined up way, aligned with the business, will get you there faster. You'll innovate faster. You'll add more transformational business value faster. you know, and it's as simple as that. It's a journey. Yeah, it's not a switch you turn on. A lot of the ingredients will already be there in your organization, but it's a mindset shift if you start working in this way.
It's been a fascinating conversation. I could talk to you for the rest of the day. So again, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us, and have a great rest of the day.